So we are here today for a Minutes and Live Meeting Manager training in Civic Clerk. And that is going to cover not only the minute side of things for creating that document, but with the live meeting portion included, you'll be able to do things like electronic voting with the board if you would like. You can show a page in Chambers if you have a screen or a projector that you can put it up on, and that will show the current item being discussed. If you have timed public comment, you can show a timer, and you can also display the vote results as well on that page. And so just to confirm before we get into all of those features, are you looking to use electronic voting for the Board of Commissioners?
Well, I do. I'm the clerk, the BOE, the Board of Equalization clerk, and we do not use votes. And I don't see that being in the future either. However, I am not quite sure if the commissioners will do. I do know that the amongst the three of them they do vote, but I'm not sure if it's like any outside people have any chance to vote on anything.
Okay. And I'm actually looking at our kickoff notes, and it looks like we said no to voting originally as well.
Yes, I don't see that.
Okay. No, I mean, not a problem. I don't want to cover things that are never going to be used. We can do a quick overview of them just so you could see. But for the most part, we'll just do the other parts of today's session.
Sounds good.
Are you interested, I suppose, as well with that then, are you interested in having your board members use the board portal to access the agenda and packet?
Yeah, that will actually be very convenient, especially for me since I do a lot of copies, and that would help me from just upload them on here, and they can do a visual look into instead of doing hundreds of copies.
Yes. Yeah. So that being the case, I actually want to start today's session with an overview of the board portal. It's something that if you do decide to use any of the features in Live Meeting Manager, which you can even without electronic voting, the board members will have to know how to use the portal for those pieces. So let's go ahead and start with that before we switch back and forth too much here. And so we're actually going to change this text document just a little bit then, because I want to point out that Civic Clerk has multiple pages that can be used in the system here. The URL that you're most used to using is the one that we see here, and that's the Agenda Management Portal, which is this purple sidebar version of Civic Clerk. But today we are going to look at two additional pages, the board portal and then the live meeting display page. And as we get to each of those, I'll make sure we get that URL in here just so we have it in the recording and free to view. And we can also send this information separately, and I'll also show you where you can access it from the system.
Okay, great.
So main page here for most users is this top one, right? It's got the Franklin Co. wa.v8.civicclerk.com. Your board portal, on the other hand, is an entirely different URL, which we do on purpose because board members usually do not interact with this side of the system at all. We don't want them in here looking at draft agendas or anything that might never see the light of day, depending on what it is and how it develops. And so board members actually can use it. You can bookmark this URL for them or do whatever you need to make sure they know it. But as an agenda manager, you can access the board portal by clicking your initials here in the top right, which is what we do for a few things like the Help Center and settings. And then below that, you can see we have links for each of the portals that we'll discuss today. So the board portal can be accessed here. The board portal display page, which you can show in Chambers, is also here. And then finally, our public portal is even accessible from this menu, just in case you need to look at it at any point. Then you don't have to remember all those URLs.
Perfect.
So the board portal, as I mentioned, completely different page. We'll go ahead and switch to that now. It is a much simpler version of Civic Clerk here that is intended really just for board members to be able to access via any page that they would have available to them for this. And so, what shows here are only agendas that you've published to the board. Keep that in mind. So you could have a million agendas in the system, and they could even all be published to the public side of Civic Clerk, but publishing to the board portal is a separate process and an individual action.
Okay.
A few other things to note about this for our quick overview before we get into the extra features that it has. Each tile, when you publish an agenda, it'll have its own tile here on this page. And the way that it works in the portal, or in the board portal, is it's reverse chronological order. So if you use Civic Clerk for a decade and have 500 meetings published to the board portal, your board members won't have to sift through them to find the most recent. They can always look in the top left corner.
Great.
And so then when they're ready to use this, they can do this anytime you've published. So if you publish your packet, 3 or 4 days before the meeting, they can go into the board portal right away at that point and start viewing the agenda, taking notes, or doing anything they need to prep for the meeting. To do so, we'll click in on the agenda that we have published today, this 1026 one for our training, and that will take us to a new page with our agenda layout. So this isn't the formal version. Those files do exist here. I can actually view the agenda with this blue button here and review it this way if I want. So if they like that version, that's fine. However, the other version, which I think it has a lot of really great benefit, especially depending on the features you'd elect to use from today's training. The other view is this drawn out version. This will have every section and item displayed with its own line and options here with these 3 dots. You can see when you open this up, there's a few options to review, look at attachments, check any notes they may have taken. And we have a speaker feature you'll see in a bit here, and that would show any speakers that are assigned to an item or who have signed up. These options you don't have to use very often. The only time you would really do that, honestly, is if you have to look at notes for a specific section like call to order. Items, on the other hand, you can just click on the name themselves. So sections, I can't do that, as you see, but if I click on, let's actually go down to consent here, this first item, it will take me into a new page for that item, showing me the section that the item is in, the name of the item here, and then a few quick pieces of info, such as who created it, what department it was entered under, who the sponsor is for that item. And we're not using recommended action, so this currently won't display anything. The other options, though, that we see on here is you can see each attachment has its own individual link, so they can view each document separately. They don't have to do it all in a single packet. And then there is a notes box below that to take any notes they would like for this particular item.
Okay.
Notes are private to board members. It's based on login, so any notes they take here, no one else in the county would be able to see that. You can't see that as an administrator. Other board members cannot, staff cannot. I can't either, even as a Civic Plus employee. That being said, while these are private, it really depends on what Washington's open records law is, because while they're not accessible by anyone usually, if you receive an open records request for notes, or whatever the request is includes notes, depending on your open records law, these can be subject to that request. Some states, these are considered draft notes and do not fall under that purview, and so they're just completely private, but in others they can be pulled in open records. When that happens, if it is something you need, you can email our support team, and that will be kicked up to our tier 3 support team, who they're the only individuals in the company that have access to pull these notes. And it's like 2 individuals, so you don't have to worry about anyone seeing this. The notes box right here is really simple to use. They just can start typing in their notes, and you can see the moment I start typing text, a little note here lets me know that everything is being saved automatically. So unlike the item side of things in Civic Clerk, you do not need to worry about hitting save. They can just simply type in all of the notes that they would like, and it's going to save it as they go along. So I'll just type in a little bit of example text here so we can see what that looks like spread out.
Okay, great.
Reviewing attachments up here is very easy to do. They can click on any attachment they would like to view, and the system's actually going to pull it up in the portal for them. So they don't have to download it to view it. They can click on it and it will pull up a viewer for them to then to look through and view information on. So I can review it, close it out or download it, do whatever I need with this specific attachment, and then just move on to the next one. Maybe this request as an example here. Now, when they're looking at the documents here as well, let me zoom in just a little bit here for us on the actual portal. You'll see here that there's an annotation option at the very top in the left here. When selected, this will pull up a set of tools for the board to use for annotations. So if you have board members that like to take notes on the actual document itself, they can use these tools and highlight important information. So maybe 2 of these are very important to them, so they can highlight it. A little button pops up where they can then add a comment and type in any additional notes here if they would like. Got a nice little typo in there, it seems. And then a few other options as well. I don't know if your board members have a device in Chambers already, or if they bring their own, but if it's an iPad, which we see a lot lately, we have a freehand annotation tool. So if they don't want to type, they can actually use this squiggly line here, and with a stylus or just their finger, they can go ahead and write notes as well this way. So that's also another option to do. Just a couple more tools here. If you'd like to experiment with this, you do have access to the portal, but just a few other things, if they want, or if something ends up being removed from this report, there's a strike through option. So maybe these first 2 did not happen. We can just cross those out, even take some notes on why that was struck through. So a few options there. Legislation can be tracked. Sometimes we see people do that for annotations. There's a little stamp tool here. And so I could just say, if this item was approved, we'll just give it a nice big stamp.
No.
What was it? Any question?
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
So they can take all the notes and annotations on the actual document themselves if they would like. And then over here in the top right, there's a couple options to download this download icon. They can download the original document, or with annotations, I can include those and download an actual reviewed version. The other option here is there's a save button right here. This is save and exit. When you click this, it will save these annotations and then take me right back to that item page originally that we were on, as you see here. The nice thing is, though, is if I go back into that zoning request, it will pop back in and load those annotations. So it's a cloud-based platform for the portal here. Board members can log in at home, in the office, wherever they are, anywhere in the world, really, with internet access, take the notes that they need, review things as needed, and then log out, come back into, the county, log in in Chambers when the meeting's happening, and these notes will be here. They don't have to carry anything with them. You don't have to print anything out. It'll always be in the portal for use. A few last things here on navigating our view, or this initial view. We do have a star up in the top right here, so we can favorite an item if it's really important to them. And then for easy navigation, we can go back to the agenda this way and then pick our next item. You can see that the one I just starred has that star here, so we can easily find it again. But another option is from this page, if I have more consent items to look at, below the text box is a previous and next item button that can be used as well. So we can just kind of roll through the agenda here and look at the next item here for the consent calendar. We'll go ahead and take some notes. We can review some of our documents here if we need, whatever they want, and go through item by item. So let's go back to the agenda page here. Do you have any questions on how to use it so far before I show you just one other way to view documents?
No questions at all.
Okay. So as I showed a moment ago, the blue buttons here can pull up the agenda and packet, and these will pull up the actual formal version that you've published, so we can see the packet here and all of the information that we need. The one caveat with this, and the reason I don't recommend using this for the packet, is even though it seems really great because we can see all 44 pages on a single screen instead of having to go item by item, and we do have our annotation tools here that we can use and do all the markup that we want and go through it. The issue with using this view in the board portal right now is, as we take notes, this is great. I can highlight, scribble, do whatever I need to do. The problem here is there is no way to navigate via the bookmarks the packet usually has. And so if we're opening this up in like a PDF viewer or even just within Chrome, we would be able to pull up the document outline and navigate using bookmarks. However, unfortunately, this viewer does not have that ability. So even if I took notes, all the way down here, let's just scroll down to like page 27 here, I can take notes here and, whatever scribbles I want to do, that's fine. The problem is I don't have any way of noting that I have notes on page 27. Right? The options over here do not show that. And then the view option will allow us to look at thumbnails. And so this can sometimes be okay because I can see where my annotations are. But if you had a 500-page packet, nobody wants to scroll through 500 thumbnails to see this. So while this can be nice to view it, if you plan on taking notes and so on, I don't recommend this view simply because it's a little more difficult to go through things, whereas this can be done very quickly. So that's a basic overview of our board portal. There, are a few other things in here that we can talk about in a moment, but that's how your board can use the portal to view and access documents. So that does not require anything that we're about to cover for the live meeting manager. This is just a part of the standard use of the system. So even if you don't use anything else we talk about today, this is still available to your board to use. One final piece, actually, before we switch into the other content today, there is a notes feature at the bottom here on the right-hand side. When you select this, it will take you to a new page that looks identical. It doesn't look like anything really changed here, but the notes page will show every agenda the board member has taken notes on. And so because we took notes on the only agenda here, it is showing. However, if there were 10 agendas here, but we only took notes on this one, that's the only one that would show here. The difference between these two pages is when I click on the agenda for the notes option, it will actually pull up a summary of my text notes. It doesn't take me into the agenda initially. So I can see what items I've taken notes on. And if I want to review them directly, I can click on it and it will take me right in. But the other option here is if you have board members that just like having notes in front of them, they love having paper, in the meeting, then they can take all the notes they want, and then right here they can just print it out. And this would have a summary of the notes, so they can see the name of the item, the date and time they took that note last, and what the note is here. It's not really intended to be a study sheet for council. This is more the document that we pull if we get an open records request and it qualifies. This is what we would send you as well, but it also just kind of serves double duty here, so I can use use this for any notes that I want to as a summary. Printing them out, on the other hand, though, may change their status from draft notes to official work for a meeting, so that would be another thing to just kind of maybe consider and when we tell board members how to use this. But one final thing about that too is if you find out that your notes here would be subject to open records requests, we can actually change this parenthesis or this parenthetical here. So it could say private, comma, subject to open record, just so board members know whatever they're typing in here needs to be, in a clean fashion like it normally would. So there's our quick overview, how to use it in general. We're now going to complicate this a bit more and talk about how that interacts with our minutes and live meeting manager. So let's go back now to the agenda management side of things. Let me actually copy this just because I'm not sure if we ever put that in here. So the board portal URL you can see is different than that first URL. It does not have the V8 in the middle. So it is an entirely different page that they're accessing. And then there's just a quick modifier here to get to the right side or the right page. Even without this, you should still be able to access the board portal. But that is just a good one if you want to bookmark it on a board member device. So now we know how board members will interact with agendas and packets outside of a meeting. We're now going to incorporate the minutes feature and talk about how the live meeting manager portion of minutes can interact and help board members along in a meeting as well. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to do electronic voting. We really won't touch on that much today, but the board portal has additional features with the live meeting manager, which can be really helpful just in general. start with all of that, we have to get to minutes first. So that's going to be step one today, getting to that minutes feature. We get to minutes by going to the board in question and the meeting in question that we want to take minutes for. So we're going to use this training agenda that we've been developing over the last few sessions today. We'll click into the agenda itself. And then when you have access to minutes for a board, whatever board it is, you will see a go to minutes button in the top right corner. And so this, depending on how we set up all the users and their access in the system, it will be there for some boards if they're the manager, and it won't be there for others if they're just a standard user for the board. But it's present on every agenda page, keep in mind. So if you're on the main page here, which is probably where you'll start to go here, it's always there. But let's say you just were checking out something else on the agenda, like your file, then you can also see that button. It does not matter which page you're on. It's always going to be there when you're on an agenda page. So when you're ready, we'll go ahead and click Go to Minutes, and that's going to take us to our Minutes Settings page. And so the Minutes Settings page allows us to set up and enable specific features for every add-on that you are using regarding Minutes, Live Meeting Manager, and even CP Media for streaming. The first box here is just for minutes in general, so this is nothing that you really have to worry about too much. However, I would recommend, just in general, selecting this first item because this will help you navigate minutes in just a moment. This will show our items by their truncated name, which is about 50 characters long versus the full name in case they're like 30 or 40 words long. It will not change what the minutes look like to the public, but it will help you navigate here in a minute, as you'll see. So I always recommend selecting this. If it ends up not working out in a moment, as we'll see here in a second, then you don't have to, but this can just help you as a minute taker navigate the agenda.
Okay.
The time boxes here, we're not going to worry about just yet. We'll revisit these in a moment, though, because they will become important for streaming. So we'll go ahead and move on from there. And then the next portion is our Live Meeting Manager setting. And so all the settings here are for live meeting features. Not all of them have to be enabled. Most of them often are not. So it really just depends on what you'd like your board to do. If you're not planning on using electronic voting and you don't really care about board members joining in the board portal, and which is often the case if you're not doing electronic voting, then the only setting that matters here is the second one here, auto bookmark when set current is selected. And I see Julio's here, so maybe you can help confirm as well. Do all boards that we're planning on set up stream a meeting, or is it just for the Board of Commissioners?
It depends on the board. The Planning Commission, they do stream. And the Board of Commissioners, they stream. Board of Equalization, they stream. Yeah, I think most of them do.
Okay. So because of that, for everyone then, anyone watching this training or what have you, I always recommend selecting the second option. Since we're streaming, we want to be able to bookmark our agenda to the video, and the easiest and most efficient way to do that, that'll save you time, is this second button here, auto bookmark when set current is selected. You'll see how this works in just a moment. The option I skipped, however, is another one that I would recommend enabling, even if you're not going to be doing electronic voting. This option would allow board members to join the meeting in the board portal, which will add some additional live meeting features that can be helpful for them. So we'll go ahead and check this now. When you do, the system does a quick refresh in the middle of the page, in case you didn't catch that. Every time you do it, it's going to do that refresh, so you can just see that here. And what that has done when you check this is now back on the board portal, that particular meeting has a join meeting button on the tile. And so this should be done before the meeting at some point. You could do it the day of, I know Board of Commissioners happens at 9 a.m., but this could happen the day of at any point before the meeting. So, if someone happened to get to work at 5 and wanted to do it at 5 a.m., you could check this then. It doesn't matter when you do it, as long as it's done on the same day before the meeting. Most of what we're talking about here can be done in advance. So everything we're currently building a process for is not in the moment have to do it and then write into the minutes. So kind of keep that in mind. A lot of this, while being done in one training, is a drawn out process that can be done across multiple stages. When you allow board members to join and this button appears, before they click into the agenda, we ask that board members actually click join meeting, and that will allow them to take their own role status. If you're not doing voting, this doesn't really matter very much, but it is something they'll have to select when they click that button. And so let's go ahead and mark myself as present and voting here and hit save. And that will then take me into the agenda now that I've registered as present in the meeting. So just a quick change in terms of the day of and what board members will do. Now that I have joined the meeting, if you look in the top right corner of our screen here, we have a roll call section, and it lets us know that one person is present. I assigned myself to the board today as an example, just so we could see how these features work. But if you're not doing this bottom or this first option here, allowing board members to join, roll is also something you can track manually. So you can go ahead and hit roll call here, and it will pop up the board members that you have assigned to the board. These are just examples, obviously, but once we get board member, if you'd like to use our vote tracking features and so on, we will have to register them, and then we'll have them show up here for you automatically for each board. If you are allowing board members to join like so, then seeing the word joined underneath their name lets you know that they have properly signed into the portal and registered themselves for the meeting. If you do want them to join, then this is where you can check to see if anyone's struggling. It always happens every now and then because board members can get a little embarrassed if they're having technical difficulties. And so I've seen it where we're trying to do electronic voting and someone says, oh, I'm not getting any of those pop-ups or anything. And it's because they never actually went through the process we told them, and they were too embarrassed to raise their hand and say they had an issue in the middle of a study session or something. So if you just want to check this page, you can see and make sure everyone's joined. When they are joined, they will have a status around them like I do here. But for everyone else, or if you're doing manual in general, you can highlight over the name and just mark present and voting, present and not voting, absent and excused are the 4 options. We also have an mark all as present option here. So if you just want to, if everyone's there, go ahead and do that, or then reverse our work in reverse here and just mark someone absent if needed. Roll call, while done initially at the beginning of the meeting, it can also be changed in the middle of the meeting. So if you have a member who recuses themselves due to a conflict of interest, you can actually switch them to a non-voting member for a single item and then switch them back to voting for the rest of them. The other options that you see here in the live meeting section are typically left as is. The chair view would allow one person in the board. You can see our 3 members here. It would allow them extra permissions in the board portal that can change what is going on in the meeting with the display page. They would be able to call speakers and switch items to current items and so on. And so usually that's just too many cooks in the kitchen. You're already trying to do that and make sure things are going smoothly. You don't want your chair also in there hitting buttons because they think they're ready for the next item when that's really not the procedure. So it is something that is there, but again, I've just never seen someone actually use that feature before because usually you're the one doing it. The last 2 options refer to the final page that we need to review today, which is the meeting display page. This is also accessible in that top right corner, please remember. So if I open up my gold circle, there is the board portal display page is the title of it. And that will take me to a new page that is very similar in URL to the board portal. It's actually identical, just with a single addition at the end. You can see here it just has display. And so this is what we would use to display our current item, vote results, speaker timer, and so on. While it is accessible from this page, you do not need to be logged in to access it. Anybody with this URL can go to this page, so it isn't something I'd show the public. It doesn't really matter if they have it because they can't do anything, right? If I get to this page and hit display, all it's going to do is show me what is currently being shown for the public. And so right now we're on our welcome screen since we haven't pushed it forward at all. So while it is, one of those things where we don't want the public to have this URL, it's not the biggest deal. That being said, just for the visibility and everything on the page and space, I do recommend full screening this just so it looks nice and clean on that monitor. Julio, is this something you think you'd want to use for some of the meetings like Board of Commissioners?
That's a good question.
Well, we'll at least show you how it works. And then, if you're interested in getting that entered, really, like I said, it's just this URL. So whatever computer you use in Chambers to display things, you just have to bookmark this page. No login required.
Okay.
So we are on our welcome screen for our meeting right now. This is what would show in Chambers if we wanted to use it. We can change the blue and match, colors for the county if you'd like, but that's pretty much the only change we can make on these at the moment. And part of that is for readability. If we just allowed random colors for everything, then there's a potential that it would not be ADA compliant and have enough contrast. So we don't have a lot of options at the moment, although we are looking into adding those in the future. It's just kind of a balancing act, of what should we allow versus what would make us fall out of compliance. One other thing that I want to note here is please take a look at, underneath welcome to it has the name of our agenda here. So this will not be the name of your event. This will always be the name of the agenda. My event for this agenda is actually titled User Training Canceled, but the display page always shows the actual name of the agenda. So that's another reason to ensure when you're creating your agenda here, whatever name you type here is clean, concise, and not anything too lengthy. We don't need the date in there because as you see here, we have our date and time below. So don't worry about anything like that when creating an agenda. We really just need the name in there. Let's go back to that one we're using today and back into settings. The two controls down here relate to this page. So usually we leave it as automatic so the system can just show the correct page each time when needed. I would not change this. If you switch this to manual and it says person running the meeting will switch views manually, that means that you have to have another staff member other than your minute taker dedicated to the 4 buttons you see in the top right corner here. Really, it'll be just these 3 once the meeting starts. But if you do not leave it at automatic, then someone will manually have to select what to show on that page. The welcome screen message above our agenda name can also be changed here. So this can be, you can add, sometimes if you don't have the county name in the agenda name, it might just say, welcome to the Franklin County Board of Commissioners meeting. So that's one thing you could do here. Just type it in here and it will refresh when done and saved. The only thing to note about this as well is while there is no counter here, like you'll see today in a few other spots, there's about 100 character limit here. And that's just because on the page, we only have so much space to use for this text. So if you wrote a novel, it obviously wouldn't be able to display correctly. So it won't tell you when you've hit the limit, but I would just keep it under 10 words if you had to add more. The final thing on this page that I want to quickly cover is this is where we can start our stream for Civic Clerk. So we had our CP Media meeting the other day, if you recall, and we showed you another way to start the stream from the event page. However, this is probably the best way to start a stream for a meeting because this is just, the landing page for minutes before our minute taker and meeting manager go into the actual feature and use it during the meeting. And so since they will already be coming to this page to then go to the minutes feature, I think it's often best if you can build the process to have the meeting manager actually start our stream here instead of doing it from the event page. So this will start that stream, remember, from our discussion. One thing to keep in mind with that, though, with what we were talking about, is you will have to start it from your encoder first, remember. So can you remind me, Julio, what was the process we talked about with that? Are you going to start the encoder and then someone else does this, or were you also going to set this live?
So we actually have a tablet right next to the clerk's workstation that where they can press a button to start the encoder to start
Okay.
recording, to start the stream.
Mhm.
So yeah, however way we need to, we can always just
Okay.
train the clerk on which
Okay.
order. I can't remember which one we had to start first. Was it the
Encoder first.
encoder first? Okay.
Yep. So and again, that can be started whenever with the way that it works here, because even if you started your encoder this morning, nothing shows on your site until you hit set live.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah, we do have folks that stream 24/7 to us, and then they simply just start it whenever they need it.
And I have a quick question, Julio. So how would I do it for the Board of Equalization where I don't go live? I just want to record it, and then down the road, I would want the videos to be released.
That is a good question. Is
Is there
there
a
a way
way?
to
Yeah.
only record in Civic Clerk without actually being live, or will we just have to upload the videos after the fact?
Yeah, so you wouldn't be able to use this button. You'd have to upload it after the fact because,
Okay.
well, we would be technically we can record without showing the video live. The only way to actually accommodate that, however, would be to unpublish the event itself. So
Okay.
I could, unpublish this while we're recording via that set live button, but that also means that the event and agenda would be hidden from your portal.
Yeah.
And yeah, while that's unpublished. And so I wouldn't recommend that. If you didn't want to stream the Board of Equalization, then you could just record it on the encoder, and then yes, you'd have to upload it after the fact.
Okay. Sounds good. That answers our questions.
Okay, so it's basically works about what we're doing now.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Okay.
Just instead of us like using this instead, you
Mm,
really wouldn't even need to record to YouTube or anything. You would literally just hit start on the encoder and it would start recording.
okay, got
Um,
it.
and then yeah, as long as it's recording, we yeah, we would be able to upload the video after the fact to Civic Clerk.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Would Maria be starting the encoder in that case, or who starts the encoder for her?
Yeah, so the actual clerk themselves, they start the encoder.
Okay. Because one thing I would recommend trying to build into that process, even if you're not going to be streaming with the set live button here, is when that encoder button is clicked to record, we should also click the set to current time button here instantaneously if possible. So if you have a tablet for the encoder, click record, and then the moment that happens, you should click set to current time here.
Oh, okay.
And the reason that is because bookmarks are based off of the actual start time, not 00 on the video.
I see.
And so if you don't have this set, then your bookmarks, you'd either have to do them after the fact. So you'd have to watch the meeting again and set bookmarks. But if you set the time, even if you're not streaming, you can at least have bookmarks with the correct timestamps, and that should work just fine.
Okay.
For those who would be streaming, we hit this button before the set to current time button. So the usual process for actual streamed meetings would be once everything here is enabled, when we're ready to actually start showing the meeting on the portal, we would then hit set live and immediately jump up and hit set to current time here. It's very important that as we hit it as close to identical as possible for both of these buttons. It's a bit odd. I understand, and I wish they could just do it at the same time. But it's important because if you have a bookmark that's 0 minutes and 20 seconds, then it's not 0 minutes and 20 seconds from 00 on the video. It's 0 minutes and 20 seconds from 2:44 p.m. And the video will also have that timestamp for its start time. So if you do not set this, which it defaults to midnight, then rather than 0 minutes and 20 seconds in from 2:42, it would be 0 minutes and 20 seconds in from midnight that day. And
I
that
see.
wouldn't work properly. So yeah, that's really regardless, I think it would be good to build this into the process then. For those
Okay.
streaming, it's easy to remember because it's the moment you hit set live, we scroll up and hit set to current time. If you're off and you forget that, it's okay, but try to guess or try to figure out what the gap between was, because if you forget for 5 minutes and then click this, all of your bookmarks will be off by 5 minutes. And that's okay. We can actually adjust all bookmarks in one action with, saying we push everything forward or backward 5 minutes, but it is something you'll have to know the difference so we can then make that adjustment.
Okay.
So I just want to recap for the video as well and what we're doing here, because there's a lot of explanation when we first go through this page, as you see here. However, we do not have a lot of process here. So the day of the meeting, all we're doing is 5 mouse clicks. We're not having to set a bunch of things up, configure things, or do anything like that, or explain it like we've done so far. Really, when we're on this page, it's 5 seconds. You go show items by short name, allow board members to join, auto bookmark when set to current. You could do that hours before the meeting, and that's fine as long as it's done the same day. And then when you're ready to stream, 2 more clicks, set live, and then set to current time. So if you're doing it all right before the start of the meeting, then it's just 5 clicks, boom, 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 and now you're done. So just keep that in mind, because it's a lot to wrap your head around, but it's not a lot to do in the system. For anyone that's not using the live meeting manager features at all, really the only thing they're doing here is show items by short name, and then if streaming is going to happen, they need to set live and then set to current time. We can ignore these otherwise. I still, however, highly recommend this auto bookmark when set current is selected. All right, so our settings are now complete. We've got our process built. Let's now go into minutes and start working in that feature. To do that, we'll use this orange view menu here again, just like we have with the agenda and item. We now have pages specific to minutes. When I open up the dropdown, we've got just a few options here, and our next stop is minutes summary. That's going to take us to a new page that looks almost identical to our agenda outline, right? When we click on an agenda. The difference here is on the right, we still have our roll call option. So we're in minutes, we know that. And we don't have that sidebar here with our date, cutoff, and other pieces of info for the agenda. This is going to be used by something else here in just a moment. For now, though, let's go ahead and get into our minutes piece. The most basic use of minutes is simply clicking on the section or item that you would like to record minutes for. So we can start with call to order, for instance. And when you do, it takes you to a new page, which we call our discussion page for that section or item. This box is our minutes box for call to order. If I then want to go down to approval of minutes, I can click on the item and it will just switch me over to a new box for that particular item. And so minutes navigation is very easy. Click on the first one to get to the discussion page, and then over here on the right, every time you have new minutes to take, you'll simply click on that section or item to take minutes for it. Now, one thing I want to show here while we are talking about navigation is, if you recall, the very first click on the settings page is show items by short name. What this does is, over here on the right-hand side, all of our items are only showing about 50 characters. You can see a lot of them cut off halfway through the item name here. This is usually okay here because this gives us enough context to know what the item is if we need to select it. However, depending on how your items are labeled or worded, sometimes we see customers have formal beginnings to a lot of their items. That says a resolution to authorize the board to, and then it has the actual name and so on. In that case, it would look similar to how these items do, where they're all identical because we can't get to the end of the item this way. And so, if that's okay, you can click in and you'll see the full name here. Remember, it does not change how your minutes look. It's just for this pane. But if it makes it difficult to switch through these items, then you can simply uncheck that and or don't check it to begin with. And now when we're on this page, it will show the complete name of the item here. It's not too bad here. So honestly, if your items are short like this, I wouldn't worry about the setting. But if you have items that end up getting to be 30, 40, or 50 words long, then imagine having to scroll through blocks of text of 50 words here, right? If you had 15 items on the agenda, you'd be doing a lot of scrolling here. So I like that short name option simply because it cleans this up for easier navigation. So let's go back to our call to order here now so we can start taking minutes from the top of the agenda. The discussion box is how we take those minutes, as I mentioned a moment ago. And so anything you type here will instantly become minutes. So just as a quick example, I could say the meeting was called to order at, and we will say 2:49 p.m. Done. If you take a look at this green button in the top right here, you'll see autosave is on in this feature. So unlike the minute or the item side of things, minutes does have autosave on, similar to the board portal. And we do that because we know a lot of times you're trying to do some quick notes and tracking and so on in the middle of the meeting. And if your board moves really fast, we don't want you to have to worry about whether or not you saved this whole thing that you just typed in, if it was a paragraph or whatever. And so rather than make you do that, autosave is on. It takes about half a second. If I type in more text here, you'll see that it flashes white and now we're good. So by the time you've finished typing and then go over to select your next item, you should be good. If you want to wait for that flash just to be safe, please do, but usually you're okay by the time you click over here as long as you're not speeding through it. Autosave can be turned off right here, and then you'd have to just manually do that here with the save and next item. I don't see much need for that, especially in the middle of a meeting. You don't want to have to remember this because now that it's hidden, it would be very difficult to remember that sometimes. So I wouldn't necessarily do that. But that is our basic overview here. Minutes is very simple, so we'll get through this here very quickly. Do you have any questions on this basic use at the moment before we start incorporating the live meeting manager with just typing minutes?
No.
Okay. So one final thing I want to show you here with taking minutes before we get back to the live meeting manager on this page is for things like call to order. Often we find that they're extremely repetitive, right? You probably have the same language in there every meeting. The time that the meeting was called to order may change if you get very specific, or a few other things may. If that's the case, we want to take that text and enter it in the system in a placeholder or in this, kind of holding bucket that you can then use to insert repetitive text without copying and pasting or having to look it up or type it over and over again. And so for things like call to order, we always see standard text. I created an example today for the Board of Commissioners, but we can also you can create snippets for any board you want, BOE, planning, anything like that. And the way that we access them is right here in our text editor. Minute snippets will show any snippet that's been created for our use in minutes. And so you can see I created a few examples for us today that we'll go through. And call to order will insert the standard language for a Board of Commissioners meeting. Now, we would probably want to note that this is for the Board of Commissioners because this is a shared menu, just so you know. And so if it's specific like this one is, that's when we'll want to do that. But you can see it just inserts the standard language we would have. The regular board meeting portion here will actually pull from the agenda. So if you marked the meeting as a special meeting, it will pull that language in here automatically. Same thing with our start time. Right now, I believe it just pulls in the event time, but you can always update it if needed. And then we've got our address below. And so if this is what it always looks like, then all you have to do really is just click call to order and it inserts your text. Now, please remember, though, that this is just a building block. So a lot of times folks think they can't change anything. But if I really wanted to get specific and say this started at 9:04, all I have to do is edit it. So it's just a starting point, which you hopefully don't have to edit to save some time. But we can always build in places to edit if it's consistently different every time. So any questions on that at the moment?
No.
Okay. So let's go ahead and incorporate the live meeting manager. We know how the minutes work. We covered the board portal. We've seen the display page, but now let's actually start using it. Before I actually enter this, let me actually point out here, this for things like call to order, you could enter this the morning of, the day before, the week before the meeting, because this is just a draft. Nothing you type here shows anywhere else other than this page until you generate and publish the minutes document. So for text like this, sometimes people will just go in before the meeting even begins and enter all the standard or the standing text that they need, and then you don't have to do it during or after the meeting. So keep that in mind. So let's say we entered this statement before our meeting started. Once the meeting starts and board members have joined and we've got our display page showing like this and so on, we are now ready to start running the meeting. When call to order happens, the only thing you need to do during the meeting to start running it is click this Set Current button. This is going to be the most important button for the live meeting manager. When you click Set Current, a few things happen. Number one, a bookmark appears at the bottom of our page now. So this was that auto bookmark option that we selected, auto bookmark when Set Current is selected. So now that I've clicked this, we know 11 minutes and 34 seconds into when I started the stream, we had call to order. Usually it won't be that far in, I hope, but it just depends on when you hit that Set Current Time button. And so this is change number one. The other thing that happened, as you can see, is the button refreshed to red and says current item. The section is now marked over here, so even if I clicked on another one, I could always see what I'm saying the current item is. And then the other two changes that happened is on the board portal. If we allow board members to join, they can see what the current item at the bottom is. And so even if they're looking at another item on the agenda, they can always be kept aware of what's going on in the meeting. And then over here on the right is a details button that they can use to then look at the actual page for that item and then view any notes or attachments that may be there if there are. So this is really nice. Even if you're not doing electronic voting, this is why I recommend allowing board members to join, because it's just nice to keep them up to date on what's going on. The last thing that's happened here is here's our current item. And so our item, whatever the name is, shows here. The tag, we'll have to maybe discuss at a later meeting here. We might have to change this if we're going to display it, but nothing to worry about today. But it will always show the current item that you have selected. And then down here is where we'd have a few other features like our speaker timer and vote results, which we'll get to in just a second here. And so the main button, remember, that we are using here for the meeting manager is current item or set current. Even if you do not allow board members to join so they don't get this bar, if you plan on using this page in Chambers, then you will need to use this button. Honestly, even if you're not using the display page, if you are streaming the meeting or would like to bookmark, I would still recommend using this button. The other option, though, if you're not going to be using any live meeting features, is the bookmark button right here. So this is pretty much the same thing, but only for bookmarks, not for all these extra changes that just happened. If you click bookmark, it'll just add a bookmark at 3 minutes in later now. Same exact one here since we're on the same item. But if you don't add it with this button, you can always add it with that one. So to run a meeting, like I said, one button. When approval of minutes happens, we'll switch down to approval of minutes, hit set current. It will then refresh with our bookmark. We can now see it in our board portal, and we'll also see it here in our display page. It's really, really easy for navigation and running the meeting. I'm going to go down to our approval of the consent agenda for our first vote here today. I know you would normally do it for warrants as well, but we didn't have any, so are listed here. So I'm just going to go ahead and go down to consent. If you're navigating here, by the way, if maybe approval of minutes is still happening or there's some more discussion happening in between here, you can always go down here and get ready and prepare for whatever's about to happen for this item. And then whenever they go, okay, and now the consent agenda, that's when we click that button. So sometimes you might build it in immediately if that's how your process is working with switching, but this is really just clicked once it starts being discussed in Chambers. So I would like to show you voting now. I'll show you just our standard manual vote tracking here, and then if we got time, I'll just pop a electronic vote up for us so you can see how that would work as well. But consent would be a place where we are going to have a vote. Usually we vote on all items on consent at once unless one is pulled. And so in this case, we are going to do our vote on approval of consent agenda. We do not want to actually carry the vote out down here because wherever you create a vote, whatever section or item you're on, that's where it will be shown in the public portal. So even though the minutes may show at the bottom, we want to run the vote at the top. To run a vote in Civic Clerk, we will use our orange motion button here on the left-hand side. This will open up a vote box below everything for us here. So you can see under discussion, we now have a motion. And what we want to do here is just do a quick summary of our motion name. So first things first, what are we doing? If it's for the consent agenda, we'll go ahead and type that in here. And so I believe that the way at least the BOC does it is it would be approve consent agenda items 1 through 3 in this case, and then as presented. And so your motion name can be typed in here. However, please note this also has a character limit. And so if you are planning on using this for your minutes and tracking, if your motions get really long past that limit, a lot of times people just put the name of the action in here, such as approve or whatever they may need. So just think about that. It's okay if you don't use this, but we do at least want the action action of what we're doing in here. Below that, we have our voting box, and so you can see a few options here. The 3 members we've marked as present all show like so. Some people like this card view. It's just a little more drawn out for tracking. However, just so you know, more often than not, I believe people really switch over to this list view. It's just a little quicker. Now, BOC is only 3 members, so it's all one row, even in the card view. But if you have 6, 7 members in your board, or I trained someone yesterday with 14 on their board, if you had to look through all the cards and track things, this would just be too much to do. So the list view is always a nice way to do this. When you are tracking a vote in Civic Clerk, there's just a few things to do. Put in your motion name, move down to the vote results, mark your initiate and second. And so this is something you'll always have to do. Even if you decide to incorporate electronic voting later, you still have to mark these manually. And then over here, we have our options, yes, no, or abstain. I find most boards are pretty agreeable. So if most of your votes are unanimous, we do have a mark all as yes option here. So you don't really have to worry about going one by one. If you need to change one, you can, though. That's always easy too. When your vote is recorded, the final thing you need to do is click passed or failed down here so the system knows what the status of the vote was. Right now, this is just a draft vote, so this is the official vote marker here. Before I do that, I just want to show you our display page here again, so you can see we're now on the current item, approval of the consent agenda. And then once I'm done with this, if you are using the display page, even with manual tracking like this, when you hit passed, the system is going to immediately display your vote results here. The only thing you'll need to do, and I highly recommend this for every board, run a test, because you can see here we're a little too zoomed in. And so all I have to do, and I just have to do this once, I just need to scroll it out 1 or however many is necessary to get the names to show on one screen here. Now, you may be able to get away with a zoom if you full screen it, and I do recommend that. So you can see we're now a little larger than we were without the scroll, but you'll want to figure that out, and then you should be good from there. The scroll is saved in your browser settings, not in Civic Clerk. And so as long as your browser does not clear its cache between meetings, that zoom level will always be maintained on this page. So run one vote, we'll hit passed again here, and let it show, and just make sure that it will show all names at once on the view that you would like the public to see. This would also, another thing I would recommend doing though is run a vote on a long item. Like find an item that's got the longest name you can think of, because that will add extra lines here and change your vote box and the zoom level. So you'll want to be able to accommodate for your largest items possible. So I really like, this is why I like this feature here, and why even if you're not doing electronic voting, if you do want to use a display page, I highly recommend this. The other thing that we want to do, or we want to show you here actually, is if we look at your public portal, and we haven't customized your public portal, so apologies here, you'll see more of that once we get closer to launch. But here's our user training agenda that we're working with right now. You can see it's live and streaming. If I click into this, I can view the stream here, and we're not actually streaming it. Oh, we are. This isn't messing anything up for you, is it?
That looks like an
That's
why
the
is
budget meeting this morning.
yeah, that was from this morning.
Oh, it is from this morning. Okay.
Mhm.
Are you just running a recording of that maybe? That might be what it is.
Oh, is that still going?
Let me see.
Not anymore from the look of it.
Okay.
It could have just been running the recording again. But what I wanted to show you here is, if people are watching the video, yeah, see now it just stopped the stream. But if people were watching the video here, when they switch off to new pages, that video stays with them, like you see here. And then the thing that we just did with saving a vote, it actually recorded and posted that immediately. So whenever you track votes within the system here, like we see, it will automatically post it on the public portal the moment you save it. So then the public can look here and say, how did the approval of the consent agenda go? Here's my motion. Here's who motioned or initiated and seconded the vote. And then here's how it played out. So this is just a really nice way to display this. We have a lot of states actually that have requirements that say, even though minutes have to be approved, or most places are required to show a summary of their action within 24 hours of the meeting, and they often post that a small minutes document. Instead of having to create that, having these votes display immediately satisfies that condition for most states. And so all of our votes can be shown here, even though minutes have not shown. None of the discussion or other minutes that you type in the document are going to show here. The only thing that shows is the motion that you took. Any questions on voting right now?
No.
Okay. So with our vote now recorded, and if BOE has slightly different formatting for its vote, that's okay. We can always accommodate that. But with our vote now done here for the Board of Commissioners, if this was a unanimous vote, I'm going to go up here to minute snippets, and I'm going to use my vote result auto unanimous. Now, just to show you how these snippets can be used, the initial vote result here is going to pull in what we call a plug and play snippet. So you can see it has our standard motion text here. However, all the information we track down here would need to be entered manually. But since we did record the vote down here, instead, I want to use this auto option that we see here, because this is actually going to pull in all of the information we need. And I accidentally set it to be underlined, so you'll have to excuse me here. I did not mean for that. But you can see now, it pulled in Bo's name here. Now, Bo doesn't have a title in the system, but if Bo did, Bo would have the title here. And you can see that with Teresa. It says Clerk of the Board Alvarez, right? I don't have a title, so I don't show that either. But this is just a really great way for this to show all of our information automatically without having to do anything. So I highly recommend tracking your votes, because then you can also insert your votes like this. And you can see it pulls in the motion name that we typed here, and then, oh, I have my tags in the wrong spot. Excuse me if that looks a little weird. That was my fault there with the creation of it. But it does pull in things like our vote count, and since it was passed, it was marked as carried, since that's the language you use. But the other option you have is, let's go down to like this regular business item. We'll go down here, we'll mark this as current, and we will create a vote. Here, I'll go ahead and just say, maybe it's to approve. It looked like for the BOC, a lot of times they're very generic, as presented or something like that. And then we'll go down here and run our vote, initiate, second, mark all as yes. This time, however, let's say somebody votes no. We always want to make sure that we have that correct as well. So if someone happens to vote no, same kind of process. We'll hit past, but take a look here on our display page. So when we're looking at it here, it will now show who votes no very easily and then has that different count here. When we're ready to then work with this, we'll go ahead and insert our vote, right? So let me just refresh this because I did make a quick change. And so up here, since this is the split vote, it wasn't unanimous. We do need to select a second snippet here, this split, but that will insert the same information, right? So I have one moment. I'm sorry. I just have the completely wrong tag in there accidentally. So I just need to get this fixed for us here. I just want to make sure it's showing the proper thing here. All right, let's try this one again. So split vote here pulls in, so who I marked as initiated, which was Bo again, and then it moved to approve the item as presented. Oh, that's actually already in there because I saw that was pretty much on every motion, so we wouldn't have to type that here. It will automatically do that. And then Teresa was marked as the person who seconded. Motion carried 2-1 this time. And then I'm the one that voted no. So at the bottom, or after the one here, it does list anybody that votes in opposition. So again, I just think these are really great features to use, even if you're not doing live meetings. So even if you're not going to be doing current item or anything like that, even just manually vote tracking is really nice because we get to auto insert up here. We can track this in our analytics feature. So if you'd like to pull a report, I could now go in and say, I want to see all votes by Teresa, since her history as a board member, and it would provide a report with every item and what her vote record was. And so this can be really nice for records requests as well. It has the auto insert. It displays really nicely in the public portal. There's just so many extras you really get with this, which I think is fantastic. So there's one final feature I want to show you on here, and then we can talk about any other questions you may have and cleaning up minutes. I'm actually going to go back one here to our public comment section. And so public comment is, where you would have people come up and speak, obviously. But my question to you here is, do you have people sign up beforehand, or can they just walk up? How does that work usually?
They just walk up. Okay.
And do you try to time them, or is it just kind of a free-for-all?
Yes, we timed them at 3 minutes.
Yeah, there's also a phone line that they can call into as well.
Okay. So since they don't sign up beforehand, there's a little nuance here, but we do have a timer that you can set up here for speaker, as you see. So if you switch to public comment like we've done here, then you can, and this again can be done beforehand. What I see a lot of people do is they'll just type in, since in the case of like what you described, they might type in like member of the public or citizen, phone call, whatever it may be for that person. And then, you can mark their role as a citizen, and our default is 3 minutes like you have. And so when you do this, it will add a line at the bottom for a speaker. And when you click on the bubble, it opens it up where I can then choose what to do with it. So I can actually call that individual. And what happens here when I hit call is it will refresh with the timer started. And what it's also done is now on the board portal, our board member can see that here. So if you're using this so they can keep track, they can see that. They could also see any speakers on the actual public comment item. So I could see, if you did have the names, it would be able to show that here. And then finally on the display page, we also have the name and the title. again, if you would have to have something generic just because of that, or because you don't get the names beforehand. But
So
if
this
you,
I actually do find super useful for
Mhm,
public comments because we do run into issues with, people trying to go over time or stuff like that.
mhm.
So it's a nice visual for them to see
Yep.
how much time they have left.
At about 30 seconds, it turns red. So they'll see that indicator and then it flashes at 0, but there is no sound, just so you know. So, if you wanted to just have a catch-all member of the public speaker for this, you can. What you would do though is once this first citizen is done, hit the reset timer button and it will just reset this so you can call it again. So then when the next person walks up, you can hit call and it starts that 3-minute timer again. End is also another option here. However, if you're using this catch-all speaker for anyone who walks up, when you hit end, you cannot recall them. So you would have to create another member of the public option here
Do you know how
in
that
order
works,
to do
Maria?
this.
If we have to label each speaker as a separate speaker on the minutes?
We do. So it's actually we try to, when they call in, we either I write down their phone number, and as well, if they are, I ask for their name, and if they want to be anonymous, and I'll write down anonymous, but I do write down the last four of their numbers if it's available. And also when they do speak, we try to get their name.
Hmm.
If not, then we just put, anonymous speaker or caller, but for the most part, they do give their name out.
Okay.
Okay, and so if you wanted to just start recording that up here so you could flesh that out later after the meeting, feel free. But if you're just trying to get this to show right away on this page, then you might just keep it generic here. You could also, however, call the member so that timer starts, and then there is an edit button here. So if you do get that person's name or you have it after they've said it, you could go ahead and type that in here as like Steve Smith and hit save, and it should refresh that. Maybe it doesn't on this page. Guess not. So thought you could. Apologies. I guess it pulls that when you hit call. But if you wanted to at least change this for later, then when you're reviewing your records down the road, you'd have that here as well. One final option with this is sometimes board members want to speak, and you might want to put their name in there and then board member. A lot of times board members do not have time limits. So if you don't want a time limit, just put in 0 like so. That will add them as a speaker. But then when you call them, it will show their name but no time. So that's another option if you wanted.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll use that feature because at least the way that our meetings are organized, none of the board members really have like a specific allotted amount of time or a specific time to speak. They typically kind of speak openly, and then the other commissioners comment openly about what was just said. So it's kind of more of like
Yep,
a back and forth thing between them.
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, but I do find this helpful for me, the BOE, because I do have to time my appellants when they are where we are in the meetings, as well as the assessors. And this will actually be very helpful for me because I currently use my phone as a timer.
Yeah.
So
Just remember this counts down, not up. So we don't have any way to do a stopwatch if that's what you need.
no, I just need it would be helpful for timer.
Okay. And the other option, Julio, that I've seen it used for other than board members is for staff. So like down here, if you had like department head reports, if you just wanted to list the name of the department head so the public could see who was speaking, that's another
Yeah.
option here.
Hmm. Okay, cool.
But that's the last live meeting feature today. I know we're at time here. I've just got a few things because there's actually a few things I don't think we'll really be able to talk about today without the other folks here. But I do want to wrap up at least the process first here. So do you have any questions on taking minutes right now and entering things at the moment?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So a few cleanup things that I would just like to show you then. One thing that's very important for any board who is going to be streaming via the public portal is at the end of the meeting, we need to remember the closeout process. Because if it's, Maria, you probably won't have to worry about this because you're going to be uploading a recording. But for the Board of Commissioners and planning and so on that stream, if we do not stop the stream, it will go overnight. And that's
Oh,
an issue.
wow. Okay.
It does not auto stop because we do have some folks that have like 9-hour meetings. And so, we can't really set a time that would work for anyone or for everyone. I had a customer just last week actually email me about this. They forgot and then saw it the next day in the afternoon, and they had an 18-hour recording that was put up for their board. And so,
Jeez.
we don't want that, obviously.
Yeah.
The system can accommodate it, as you can see, but we don't want that. So please, every time you are done with the meeting, even before you start working on actual minutes, we need to remember to stop the stream. And so we would need to go back to minutes here at the top. That takes us back a page, and we'll visit this in just a second again. But let's go back to minute settings right now, and we will go down to the bottom and end the stream. This will then process the recording and post it automatically with whatever bookmarks we added. But it's very important. You can always tell though, because if you remember when we were looking here, it had this live indicator. If I refresh, it's now gone. So it's very important that we pay attention to that. That will
So,
also, oh, go ahead.
quick question. So, what about when we stop streaming from the actual encoder itself? Will it eventually time out and stop set and then unset live by itself, or?
So I would recommend the encoder be the first and last thing that starts and stops.
Okay.
To make sure no issues happen. Sometimes it's okay if you lose signal. The system will just, have it as blank dead space. But sometimes, depending on how the stream stopped and what we ended up receiving at the very end there, it can actually break the recording.
Okay.
So I do recommend making sure the encoder is the first thing to start and last thing to stop, just to make sure the system doesn't get tripped up at all. And we
Okay.
may even see that here with the one that we just recorded, since that encoder had some of your old meeting showing, it may have screwed up since it stopped halfway through.
Okay. Sounds good.
But once that's done, you're done the day of the meeting. I mean, if you want to work on minutes that day, great. But now we can go back the next day, over the next week, however long it takes for us to develop our minutes and do that a little more slowly. So we'd go back to our minutes summary here again. And then we can start to see what we've done and where we need to continue working. Anything with minutes entered will have a discussion tag on the right here, so it's very easy to tell. Bookmarks are showing. Votes for any item that needed to be tracked will show. Speakers, current item will show. And so anything that we've done will show here very easily. One final tag that I want to show you about is if you are working multiple days on a document, let's say I go to call to order and I decide everything I need in here is done. This is exactly what needs to be here. Right next to the set current button is an in progress button. That will switch over to completed when you click. And now back on the minutes page, we can see that green tag letting us know it's completed. This does not lock the item. Please keep that in mind. I can actually go in here and write more text if I want. It's not locked, but it just is a nice self-check so you know what you've done and said that you're officially done with it. The other thing that can be done on this page, depending on need, is for things like consent. If an item gets pulled, we can actually reorder items on the minutes document as well. So this reorder button works just like the agenda side, with one difference. It provides those tiles that we can then drag and drop with. But do you happen to know what happens when an item is pulled from consent? Does it go to the bottom or does it go into regular business?
It usually goes down to regular business.
Okay. So let's say item 2 here was pulled for more discussion. We can then move this down wherever we want in regular business, wherever it may have been addressed. I'll go ahead and just put it at the very top here. The difference between reordering on the agenda and reordering in minutes is it does not renumber when you move it in the minutes. It keeps the old number that it had in the previous section, so you know this was not addressed in order or is an extra item wherever it was. So I'm happy to preview the minutes with you right now, but like I said, I think we need the larger group for a discussion on the minutes design because there's a few things that are a little quirky about the Board of Commissioner minutes in particular that we'll need to find a good solution in Civic Clerk for. So I think we'll have to have a minutes design meeting and maybe even a follow-up after those folks watch this recording so we can discuss those issues. If you want to preview the minutes, it is available right here in the view menu. Just like we have been using previously for settings and summary, there is a preview option here. And so I have this looking pretty similar to what your current minutes look like, at least from the Board of Commissioners. That's the example that we have. But as you can see at the bottom here, there are some differences that I want to talk about together and talk about what we want to do for this. So, for instance, our minutes are showing directly below. They're slightly indented right now, but that's because I have a placeholder here for the time that normally gets entered for each of these sections. Our consent items are also a little different than how they display on the example I have, but we've got some limitations that I want to discuss in a larger conversation. So don't worry about how it currently looks. I think it's something we'll need to confirm together, but if you wanted to take a look at any point, you can always preview it here just to make sure things are being developed the way you want them to be. At the bottom, we also have a quick footer for our signatures. For the Board of Equalization, we can change the titles or whatever we need to here, and every board can be unique here. Are there any questions right now? I think the rest of it would be better to hold off for that follow-up. But since the others weren't here, we were not able to talk about that. But do you have any questions at the moment?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, I think I'm good for now too.
It's a lot to kind of wrap your head around. I know, but a lot of this does not have to be done all at once. Most of your minute entry for the discussion is done after the meeting still. Really, during the meeting, remember, all you really need to do, depending on what features you want to utilize, is remember the set current button and then your vote tracking. Those are really the only two features that you have to interact with during the meeting. Inserting the vote or typing votes and discussions and so on, all of that can be done after the fact. So it's not necessary to do it during. But
Great.
let's go ahead and call it there since we're past time here today. As I said, we will need, I do want to schedule a follow-up because we can't have that design discussion today. And then we can answer any questions lingering there as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Everyone. Bye.